Hello YouTube, and welcome to this new installment of the Book of Five Rings analysis. We are halfway through the book. We have started the water book last time. We did one page, so we're going to continue to analyze the words of Miyamoto Musashi and try to apply them to our lives and lifting experience. He writes, "In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distanced view of close things." If you are familiar with that type of philosophy, you also might have heard the same type of mental trick that you should put a lot of thinking into small details and be as quick as possible to decide big decisions. It's sort of the same thing here. What he's trying to imply here is that we have a tendency to spend a lot of energy and time on what we perceive to be things that require that energy and time. But for most of those potential choices we have to make, it's just subjective. We are assigning a certain amount of time that we have to spend on something, and we're neglecting other things because we do not feel that they are as important as the rest, but they are. So when you see distant things as if they were close, what you're doing is that big picture that you might have seen as something global, you're going to have the ability to start looking at the single details within it. And if you take a distant view of close things, those little details that you think are not as important, if you manage to actually see the big picture and you manage to actually put them into that painting and you can take a look from the outside, you're going to realize that it's all the same thing. There's no such thing as big things and small things. Big things are made up of small things, but our minds bundle them up and it becomes that massively important block or notion that we respect as it is, but we lose sight of what it's made of. And on the other hand, the tiny things and details that we cannot really fit into a category, we lose sight of them because they're that tiny thing. But if you manage to actually take a closer look at them, you'll realize that even within that exists many opportunities, many different details. It's sort of the metaphor of the galaxy, right? You can fit an entire galaxy into a grain of sand, but if you just look at it as a grain of sand, that's all it is, right? And if you only look at it as a galaxy, that's all it is. You're going to both either lose the ability to see the details within the big picture, or you won't even notice the small picture because that's what it is for you. It's that small thing. So you need the ability to zoom in and out, which means that everything becomes both a distant thing and a close thing at the same time. It depends on your perspective of it. He says, "It is necessary in strategy to be able to look to both sides without moving the eyeballs. You cannot master this ability quickly. Learn what is written here, use this gaze in everyday life, and do not vary it whatever happens." Okay, this one is probably my favorite passage of the book because it has a double meaning, just like everything Musashi writes. First off, there's a practical aspect to that. It might sound strange, but it is actually a thing. Warning, you're going to look like a weirdo if you practice it outside, but basically what it means is when you look straight, you don't lose the ability to see on the sides. I see my finger here. I'm not looking at it, but I see it. And until I reach the dead angle that my cranium creates, which is here, this is my dead angle, I cannot see the finger anymore. I see it here, but it's completely on the other side of my head. And if I turn my head here, I can still see the finger here because I'm looking at the camera. So my line of sight is still there. If I do this, I can't see it anymore. So basically what it means is, especially in the context of battle, turning your head makes you lose time. It's a waste of time because you can just turn your eyes and your eyes turn much faster than your head. And even faster than that is not turning your eyes. Because when you turn your eyes, you start focusing your attention here, but now you're not focusing here. So if you can maintain a line of sight without losing sight of what is on the peripheral, becomes that ultimate gaze, that ultimate sight that provides ultimate perception. And I suggest you try it. I tried for a time, and I can still apply it if I want to, where you always look straight. You never turn your eyes and you never turn your neck. And you try to navigate the world like this by catching the details in the peripheral without having to look at them. It's mentally taxing, so it's going to take a lot of energy out of you, mental energy, and it makes you look very strange because we're in a society where people turn their head and their body to signify where they're going to go. Their gaze gives an indication of what they're looking at. So if you're that guy in a crowd that is looking straight, you're going to look out of place. That being said, I've noticed that people get out of your way. Meaning that if you always look straight, they always think you're going straight, so they always make a path for you. So it's a thing to try and master. Why not? He says you cannot master it very quickly, and that's true. Why? Because we have a tendency to always move our heads or our eyes. So if you always try to maintain that line of sight, you're going to find yourself straining to maintain that. It's tough to make it a habit. That's the practical aspect. What about the theoretical aspect? What about the methodical aspect? Here, in my opinion, it means, again, that ability to see that big picture without moving your head, without having to focus on one thing. Take your program. If you have to focus on one section of the program at a time, you're going to lose sight of the big picture because you're always turning your head, you're always looking at something else. And you're going to have multiple puzzle pieces that at the end of the day don't really fit because you lost sight of the big picture. If you have the ability to look at your goal, what is your goal? What do you want to do? Do you want to get stronger, bigger? And after that, by still looking at that goal, you can assemble everything around it to create something that is going to encapsulate it without moving your head, without moving your line of sight. Then it's going to be that ultimate way of achieving a program or training regimen that is going to be beneficial for your goal. The issue with that method is if I look at this thing here, there's a book right there, I can read it from here. But if I'm here, I don't have the ability to read the lines that are here because my sight is not focused on it. So it's also going to be a trade bag because you can see what's happening in your peripherals, but you cannot see the fine lines. And it's funny too with Musashi because that's a thing, a paragraph that comes out of nowhere and that would make many people confused because what is that doing here? But it's just the way Musashi writes. He says, when holding the long sword, grip the long sword with a rather floating feeling in your thumb and forefinger, with the middle finger neither tight nor slack, and with the last two fingers tight. It is bad to have play in your hands. Okay, how do I apply that to lifting? Well, it's simple. He's telling you how to grip things. Anyone who's ever grappled, especially when you have to grapple standing up, when you grab the gi of the opposite person or if you grab the collar of someone in a street fight, you're going to notice that you don't really pinch with these two fingers. You don't really grab with these two fingers. You grab with this. This is what grabs, right? You can secure with these two, but this is what is doing the action of gripping. And if you want a proof, if you're a solid lifter, look at your hands. Look at where the calluses are. They're here. You don't have calluses on your thumb or that finger, almost nothing. It's all here. My judo instructor used to prove to us that it was possible. He would grab us by pointing the finger like this. So when he grabbed, he was like this. He never secured the finger, and he had a very strong grip, and he would throw us around with these three fingers. And Musashi says the same about the sword. You grab the sword firmly with these three, and these two are floating. So they're around the hilt of the sword, but they never completely secure it because you want to have the ability to move that. He also says it is bad to have play in your hands. That's sort of a contradiction because you might think to yourself, well, if I don't secure with these two, then there's play in the hand. But in reality, those three fingers are enough to secure anything. And you're going to find with a barbell too that the reason why you cannot really apply that logic to a barbell is because the barbell is too big. If the barbell was smaller, you could grab it like this. but we need these to wrap around to secure the hand because the barbell is big. And as far as having play in your hands with a barbell, you're going to find that your ability to grip things and your grip strength it's killed, it's cut in half if there is play. Something that you're able to grab if you don't position your hand well enough and you pull and the bar has space in your hand to move, it's going to pry your hand open. Why? Because it created momentum within your hand which exceeded your ability to grip that thing. You can try it with, let's say, a deadlift. If you can deadlift 300 pounds double overhand, don't grab the bar properly, give it some play and pull, and you'll see that you won't be able to get it up. And the same applies for every grip exercise. Before you do the grip, you have to set your fingers so that there's no play in the bar. And when you pull, the bar doesn't move within your hand. Because a grip exercise really is just you trying to make sure that the bar does not escape your hands. So if you create space for it to already move around and do its thing, it's going to be even tougher to prevent it from rolling out of your grasp. So these are two very important tips that Musashi is giving us, but may I remind you that the guy never lifted weights. So again, the practice of moving one's body and to train one's body, even back in the days, there are certain things that we still practice to this day that he understood very early on. And that everyone can understand, right? Because once you know one thing, you know 10,000 things. It's just, the only thing that matters is, can you apply your sense of analysis to everything you do to get knowledge out of it. After that, there's a lot of discussion about the approaches where he tells you techniques about how to use the sword. I don't go into that. If you read the book, read them, they're interesting, but you cannot really apply them. I have a few examples of the sword techniques he gives just to, again, I want to also share the mentality and the quirks of Musashi because he's such a fun writer. And the way he expresses certain things, he doesn't even try to intellectualize or conceptualize certain things. He just writes them as he thinks, and he's just throwing that out to you like, now you decipher it. He names a technique to scold tut tut, meaning that, you know, when you get scolded, someone said, that's a technique for him because it represents the parrying of the sword that then comes down with a slash. That in his head, in his mind, that's how it's represented. He also tries to explain the smacking parry by saying you meet his sword with a tidum tidum rhythm. What is a tidum tidum rhythm? In his mind, I'm sure it's very clear, but he doesn't really explain it properly. Again, people who, just because you're very good at one thing doesn't mean that you're good at explaining it. Some people are just naturals and they won't be able to tell you exactly what. But I do think that gaining that ability is super important because this is how knowledge circulates and this is how we get better as a community. He talks also about the spirit that you have to walk on the way. He tells you to study the contents of this book, you have to take one item at a time, and through experience, you will gradually come to know the principles of the way. This is my mentality as well. You need to apply the concepts that you learn because if you don't, they're completely worthless. You have to be able to put them into words that then become actions. Deliberately, with a patient spirit, absorb the virtue of all of this. From time to time, raising your hand in combat. Maintain this spirit whenever you cross swords with an enemy. So you have to apply it all the time. You have to be mindful of these advices all the time. This is what the way is. I love this sentence. Step by step, walk the 1,000-mile road. This is what natural bodybuilding is. You cannot go in this journey thinking that you're going to make massive headways every single training session. Because if you fall into that, you're going to become the type of person that trains twice a week, kills themselves in the gym, but never really makes progress. Why? Because you lost sight of the journey. You're trying to walk the 1,000-mile road by taking jumps, but by doing that, you're just making yourself much more likely to get hurt. You're tiring yourself for nothing. Just walk. This is the cruel reality of natural bodybuilding. You have to walk. You cannot sprint this. It's a marathon. You cannot take detours. If you want to do this thing, it's going to be step at a time, and it's going to take a very long time. But eventually you're going to look behind you and you're going to see that road that you just walked, and it's going to feel good, I can tell you that. Study strategy over the years and achieve the spirit of the warrior. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. I and everyone can relate to Musashi, because I think he has such a clear understanding of the way and the path, which is also why he has a tough time explaining it, because he lives it. That's his life. You have to study strategy over the years. For lifting, it means technique, programming, every single detail you can get. It's going to become strenuous on your mind too, because you're going to always feel like there's something new to learn. You're never done, but that's the beauty of it. You're never done. You can always progress. And that's how you achieve the spirit of the warrior. There is no such thing as getting up one day and you made it. Once you understand that this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, you now have the spirit of the warrior, because you're going to constantly be evolving. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Fairly simple. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't feel comfortable or proud of what you did yesterday. What you did yesterday was yesterday. Okay, feel good about that yesterday, but today is another day and you better work. Today is its own challenge, and you have to be better than you were yesterday to beat that challenge, because you're constantly progressing. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. What are lesser men? I just said you shouldn't compare yourself to others. I think it's a poor mentality to have. I also think it can lead to either depression because you feel like you're not good enough, or ego that is out of control because you think you're better than others. That being said, I do think that there's such thing as lesser men, men who gave up. If you give up, you're not on the path anymore, you're not training anymore, you're a lesser man, because you don't have a calling anymore, you're not even working on yourself anymore. So you cannot even compare to other people. And I would say this too, even if you have a very high level and you've been training 10 years, but you became the type of man that is happy with staying stagnant. And not only that, but you preach that mentality to other people, saying that, oh, you reached your limit. In my opinion, that guy is less of a man and less of a warrior than a guy that's been training for 2 years but is still really working hard and progressing on the path. Because the number one guy is stagnant, the other guy is evolving. That evolution is what is so important. And that victory you establish over lesser men ultimately also means you're going to be able to lead those lesser men, inspire them, show them the way, show them that you can still keep progressing. And I'm sure that Musashi has had many experiences with that, because he was at such a high level of martial might that he must have encountered men who had given up. And when you are in that situation, you have two options. Either you get upset at them for giving up, or you try to inspire them. And Musashi, by writing this book, showed that he wanted at some point in his life to inspire people, which he does with a lot of talent, because I think this book is incredible. So we are going to stop here. We did 2 pages today, and we're still in the water book, but next time we reunite, which will be in 2 weeks for this other analysis, we will start the fire book. So thank you very much for watching, have a good day, and let me know in the comments what you think.